An individual once told me that if you are someone who has a mix of dominant and recessive traits, that you're better off. Um, and I wanted to dismantle this because this is not true at all. What traits you have is completely dependent on your environment, because recessive traits are not necessarily weaker than dominant traits. They are in the sense of statistics, but they aren't in the sense of capabilities. So you can take blue eyes, for example. People with blue eyes can let in more light into the retina, and so this makes them better at night vision. This also makes them worse when it comes to retinal damage from the sun. So if they get an overexposure to UV rays, they're more likely to get retinal damage. So you can see in this aspect, it completely matters on the environment. And so if you have blue eyes and you're operating in a dark environment, you're going to have an advantage to someone with brown eyes. However, if you have brown eyes and you're working in the sun, you're going to have an advantage to someone with blue eyes. Now, obviously, it gets more complex when you factor in multiple genes, but in simplistic terms, this makes the idea true. So, I had this theory. So, I had this theory that, say, let's say Sweden has 100 people, and let's say that all of them have blue eyes. And then let's say we take 10 people from India, and all of them have brown eyes. And let's say that the individuals from India have the big B, so two dominant eye color. They have brown eyes, and they're both the dominant eye color genes. And then, so obviously, everyone from Sweden has little b because they have blue eyes. So, my theory was, if you took these 10 people from India and you dropped them into Sweden, and as long as they interbred with the population, then eventually their genetics would just wash out, and they would essentially just become like Swedish people. And so I'll show you later in the video, I was partially correct, but not completely correct on this theory. And so um, my reasoning for this was just take it from eye color alone. So if a little b has a child with a big B, then their kid will take one gene from each parent. So they will have big B, little b. And so if two big B's create a kid, so two parents with brown eyes, both dominant, and they create a kid, it will almost always have brown eyes. And if two people with blue eyes have a kid, it will almost always have blue eyes. So it pulls in that direction. And so, however, if you have someone who's big B, and little b, and they have a kid, they will have a kid who's big B, little b, and there will be a 50% chance that the kid has blue eyes, or sorry, 75% chance that the kid has blue eyes or brown, 75% chance that they have brown eyes, 25% chance that they have blue eyes. However, the kid will have the recessive trait, so it will always have the little b. And then if a big B, little b, so let's say all of those Indian people bred with the Swedish people, and so now their next generation, the big B is completely wiped out, and so now their next generation only has big B, little b. And then my theory was that as they continue to breed with the Swedish people, because there's a 50% chance when big B, little b breeds with a little b, that their kid will have blue or brown eyes, that because there are more people with blue eyes, then eventually it would wash out all of the genetics of the Indian individuals, and they would essentially just be Swedes after given theoretically a long enough period of time and isolation, which is not something that happens in the real world all the time, but it's good to imagine. And so I ran this simulation and I recorded it before, so I'm going to overlay it now and try to get it right. But basically, I ran in the beginning, I had a population where there's 90 individuals, so 90% have little b, they have blue eyes. 10%, so the 10 Indian individuals have big B. And so when you run the simulation, what is interesting is, like I said, the big B genes die out almost immediately because after the next generation, now in the simulation it's random breeding, so they can technically breed with big Bs. But eventually all the big Bs, the dominant brown-eyed traits die out. And then if you go to the end of the simulation, you see that what's interesting is, so the little b stays high, but the big B gains individuals, and it's about an 80-20 mix. And so that's very interesting because that shows that if you do that where you introduce another population in, you get, in my mind, something new. And so you get something new and then you keep the old population. Now if we flip it, now what's also, so when we flip it the other way and we do 90% big B dominant brown eyes and then 10% little b, you'll see the exact same thing happen in the opposite direction. So the blue-eyed individuals will die out, and then this other group will form. Now when you take it 50-50, it's interesting because it fluctuates back and forth, and you see kind of when the dominant traits spike, the other ones dip, but then they cut back, and so they, like, it's almost like they're pulling and pushing against each other. But so this theory is interesting because it seems that the population that is outnumbered gets wiped out. But what's interesting is it creates something new. So I think that's good. But there's a lot of people who talk about, and they say that all this mass immigration is bad. And so I agree with this on the aspect of there's certain stereotypes of countries that pretty much reign true. Like when you look at German people and you say they're industrious and like organized, they like to build things, it reigns pretty true with most of the people there. Obviously individuals are different, and there's some individuals who have none of those traits and they're 100% German. But I think that there's something where that science hasn't caught up yet, but not only are our physical traits passed on, but our attitudes are most likely passed on as well. And so I think it would be an extreme loss to humanity if you tried to replace an entire population of people. I think if we lost Japanese people or Russians or Ukrainians or anyone for that matter, because when I look at other countries, I see that it's weird because there's always the idea that God gave everyone unique talents, but when you look at countries, they each have their own unique talents and they're different from every other country, which is very strange. But it makes sense with the idea that you would pass on your talents or your demeanor or like your way of doing things, the way you think. And so I think that with this simulation, it's obvious that if you flood a population with a massive amount of people, then you can kill out the other individuals in that population. Now, I think it's cool because you can create, essentially, in my mind, new people with this big B, little b. And so when I'm thinking about this, I'm just like, I had this theory and I was just like imagining, um, and so I was just imagining what would happen on the like the long term scale, and you can imagine how complicated it gets when this is just the most basic scenario that I'm running through my head. But when you take a country like America, you have so many different types of people and so many different levels of people and how people interact and other genes as well. But I think that one thing is true is I think that it would be a loss to humanity if that we destroyed the individuals who were very Japanese or the people who were very French or um, people who were very Dutch. Like if we took those people and we destroyed them, I think it would be a huge loss because I think you want those people, but immigration isn't bad because you also want the new types of people that you create. I know it sounds vague, but if I'm sure you guys understand what I'm saying. And yeah, so that was just a crazy thing. And this simulation I created with Claude Code. So props to Claude.